Hello and welcome to the live Cybersecurity Awareness Forum panel discussion on the pros and cons of gamification in security awareness. I'm Scott Wright, the Security Awareness Engagement Guy, and creator of the Cybersecurity Awareness Forum and founder of ClickArmor, the first fully interactive security awareness training platform that engages employees to retain knowledge with minimal time, effort, and cost for security management. So today is our 31st bi-weekly session. And I want to welcome back everyone who has participated in past sessions and also welcome our first-time attendees. We're streaming on Zoom, so we'll watch the chat and hopefully be able to answer questions from people and raise people's comments. And if people want to join on the panel or say something in person, we can get you up here to do that. Speaking of the chat, we really appreciate it if wherever you are, you can enter into the chat where you're coming from today. Just like to see, what kind of global representation we have in these sessions. So while you folks are entering your locations, I'll remind everybody how we use these sessions. So got a couple of slides here I'm going to go through. We actually record all of these sessions. We've done 31, I think, before today. We create blog posts from the transcripts, and then we also condense them into a quarterly report. So our most recent quarterly report has just been issued for, actually, it should say Q3, but it says Q2 there. But it's actually for the period when we had sessions between July, August, September. And it's really interesting to go in there and see what kind of data and observations people have. So those are interesting things that you can benefit from in addition to these live sessions. But we're also going to announce something new at the end of this session today, and that's going to be fun, and it'll be something interesting. I think it'll help maybe augment the value that you folks get from these calls, maybe by an order of magnitude. I will be so bold as to say. So before I go into what is gamification, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. First of all, we'll do a quick check of the attendance, where people are coming from. We have Ramara, Ontario. Thanks, Ryan. Toronto, Italy, Charlottesville, Gatineau, Quebec, Indianapolis, Oklahoma City, I think that is, Detroit, Michigan, Calgary, and Elora. So awesome, great representation from people all over the place. And I see it looks like Alan may be joining us on the panel. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to introduce himself and Alan.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. Welcome to session 31, and hope you all had a fantastic Security Awareness Month. Today is the day where we can all breathe and take a bit of a breath. But let's remember, we got to keep it top of mind, and it should be a year-long exercise, not just 1 month. But normally, this is where I introduce the panelists and myself. I'm Ryan Healey-Ogden, the Director of Cybersecurity Solutions here at ClickArmor. Again, thanks for everyone joining us. If anyone does want to jump on the panel, you're more than welcome. Just send me a message. And speaking of, welcome to Alan, our first-time panelist. Alan's from the Industry 4.0 Club, and normally I would do the introductions, but I'm just going to let Alan have the floor here and give a little 30-second hello, so you all get to know him and follow him on LinkedIn.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Alan. I'm from the Industry 4.0 Club, like Ryan said, and what I do is have conversations like these where I can learn and hopefully help to disseminate some of the interesting technologies and Industry 4.0 practices out there to help manufacturers really serve and produce products that really spark joy in people's lives. So thanks.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, and welcome, Alan. Then Scott, I'll hand it back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. So what I do usually for each of these sessions is I provide a bit of context from my experience, I guess 15 years or so teaching security awareness for businesses. And about, I guess, 5 years or so after I started doing that kind of teaching, I do it live, and I had my own online program. I got feedback from organizations that, the content I was creating for them was great, hit the mark. But I could tell that people really weren't absorbing it all that well. And, we know that after some period of time from taking training, people tend to forget things if it's not reinforced. And so I got comments from customers, even though they were happy, they said, you know, could we make this stuff more fun? Have you looked into games or gamification? And so that was around 2014, 2015. And so I did start doing some research and learned a lot about gamification, and also how directly it fits with something like security awareness training. Really fits for any kind of compliance training that people generally kind of hate or are looking for reasons to disengage with. And so people may have heard the term gamification before, and there's a lot of different definitions that you've probably heard or that you may have in mind. But from the context of what we're talking about today, I'm going to start with a broad gamification definition that I learned from a book called Actionable Gamification, written by a gentleman named Yukai Chow. Some of you may have heard of him before. He's got an interesting background because as a teenager, he was a gamer. He had a lot of friends that were gamers, and they did a lot of cool stuff. They were almost elite gamers. And then all of his friends went off and got jobs, and he didn't have anything to do. So he started trying to figure out how he could make use of his great skills at games, video games. And in the end, he decided to apply them to business, and he created a framework called Octalysis, which I've talked about in some other sessions with people before. But he has a really nice definition, which is the craft of deriving all the fun and addicting elements found in games and applying them to real world or productive activities. So it's not just games. And what I like to kind of elaborate a little bit more on these and say, we can talk about gamification in business processes. So we can use proven psychological drivers that we know motivate people and get those to be used in a way that changes people's behavior to help meet business goals. So examples of that might be, you know, having, you know, your live fishing simulations and trying to get the click rate for the organization to a certain level. That's a business process gamification. You're trying to get everybody to kind of meet some goal, and it's not in any captive environment like a video game or anything else. So that's one type of gamification that I like to distinguish. And the other is, of course, gamification in online training. So I describe that as being similar by using proven psychological drivers to motivate individuals to do things like complete the training, focus on learning, retain knowledge, and improve proficiency at whatever skill it is they're being taught in. So those are the contextual definitions that I like to use. I'm going to go into a few of the benefits as promised when we put out the abstract for this session. The number one benefit that occurs by using gamification in training is that you can improve the engagement by having dynamic, relevant experiences for people. Now, this hopefully doesn't give people seizures watching the flashing lights, but I just wanted to, you know, raise the idea that the visual experience for people in an environment for training is really important because it grabs their attention, and you need them at least to pay attention long enough to be able to experience some of the other benefits, and until they realize, oh, this is not such a bad experience whatsoever. So the second one is the ability to enhance knowledge reinforcement through interactivity. And so in this one, I've got a little thing that plays, and it basically is an interactive quiz that you get immediate feedback, and then you can actually, you know, learn a little bit more. So it's constantly asking you to interact, and it's constantly giving you new knowledge. So things like that are really important to be able to reinforce people's proficiency. If they got something right, you want to reinforce it. If they got something incorrect, you need to correct it immediately. Thirdly, the ability to motivate people to improve due to social interactions. And everybody understands what a leaderboard is from a game point of view. And it can be helpful within a training environment to understand if you can somehow allow people to rise up on the leaderboard based on their proficiency and their activity, their level of engagement. This actually provides a mechanism for driving more participation. So it's not all just about how well do you know this stuff. It's how well do you participate beyond just getting answers right. Fourthly, the ability to increase confidence through practice in a safe environment. And this is another little video that I'll play here on the screen that shows you, the ability to go into a virtual inbox, for example, for phishing, and get people to examine a message as if they were doing it in real life. But they can practice, and if they get it wrong, they get a bit of feedback and they get a chance to try again or do other things. And so those are the things that really build people's confidence and comfort level within the platform and makes it so that they're not so eager to just drop it and go back to doing other things. Fifthly, not so much on the user side, but the fact that we've gathered a lot of data around people's interactions with the systems means that we can provide better assurance for things like risk management. If people have done a number of these exercises within a short period of time, and you've got the data that shows that they've done 10 challenges and they got 8 of them right, and a couple they got wrong, maybe they were failing on a particular area, and that allows us to focus in on the areas that they got wrong. So that really is sort of a summary of all the benefits in a very high level. There's a lot of other fun things that we get feedback from people on, but those are the high level benefits of using gamification in the training context versus in the business process context.
There was Alan did post a link there to the Doctalysis
Oh yeah,
framework. So that's great. Thank you, Alan. And it's a great review for anyone who's interested.
Thanks, Alan. Great. So yeah, I'll spend a little bit of time on the cons of gamification. What are some of the things that sometimes can either be perceived as being bad or things that can really hurt the experience or the outcomes? So number one is too much exploration can waste time. So when you put something into a captive gamified environment, there's a temptation, as game developers or as people trying to teach people things, we can make it a very rich experience. And so allowing people to go into an open world and go and explore things might be good from a user experience point of view, but it's not actually efficient. And one of the things that we know is that management also doesn't want people to be spending a lot of time on training if they don't have to be. So if you put too much opportunity for exploration within that training environment, then it can actually be a little bit counterproductive. You can have too much investment in a high resolution experience, and that gets expensive. So having a 3D open world or having lots of detail does take time. It does take resources, and it ultimately would be expensive if you're doing it in a 3D environment. So if you spend a lot of time on that, the whole process gets expensive to develop, and it doesn't have to be that high resolution experience for people to actually find it relevant and engaging. Too many clickable things can also be overwhelming. So, there's lots of opportunity to, have an escape room where you can go exploring, clicking on things and learning things. And that's good in some cases. But if you make it overwhelming from the point of view of, I don't even know where to start, then that can be a negative outcome. Fourthly, a lack of coherency in narratives could cause gaps in assurance. What I mean by that is, let's say you've created a game that helps people practice creating good passwords. And maybe they can practice that over and over and over again. They could get better at it. They can score well. But maybe there are a lot of other things that you need people to learn about passwords other than just creating a good password. And if you've got a game developer who's created this requirement or this experience based on their understanding of the requirements, it might have gaps. So it has to be done in a coherent way so that you're covering all of the content and puts in the assurance that management needs to know that people have actually learned something. It's one of the toughest things to prove to management that people are actually learning. And then fifthly, only using points to report on proficiency actually kind of skews the data, because if you're giving people points for doing extra little things, doesn't mean that they're better at it. So you actually need to find a way to reward people for participation through points and achievements and things like that. But you also need a more condensed, distilled measure of people's proficiency. So there has to be kind of a separate way of measuring that. And if you're just rewarding people with points and then reporting to management saying, here's how many points your top people got, it doesn't necessarily give management the data they need for risk management as well. Any other comments?
Yeah, well, there's actually a great question from Tim in the chat. He'd just like to hear about the types of motivation that gamification works on.
Mhm.
Is it internal versus external motivation? And are the gamification strategies creating a short-term engagement motivator or a long-term critical thinking motivation?
Yeah, great questions. So I'll look at, internal versus external first. Often you'll hear it referred to as extrinsic and intrinsic rewards. So those are the kinds of discussions you hear people talking about, saying, well, we need to give people points or achievements, or give them something that makes them feel better, or maybe we're rewarding people for, we'll take the top 5 people on the leaderboard and do a draw and give people a reward. So those kinds of rewards are actually extrinsic rewards. They're tangible things you can say, yeah, this is something that people did in order to get something. Whereas intrinsic rewards are really a sense of enjoyment or experience that just causes people to want to go back and do things again, not because they are going to get something tangible out of it. It's just an enjoyment factor, really. And so those are the things that drive more long-term participation and ability to keep metrics coming on people's activities. So it's really important to have a mix of both extrinsic and intrinsic rewards. Hopefully that addresses the question, Tim. Any other comments there?
Nope. Actually, Jim said exactly. Intrinsic versus extrinsic, coins, personalized Tamagotchi, etc.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and there's also 2 Tim Kings here as well. Oh, okay. My wife Alana is logged into her computer too, so
Oh,
she's the
okay.
one asking the smart questions. So we'll
Love
give
it.
Alana the credit for that great question, Scott, and thank you very much for the answer. Tim
Excellent.
also posted a link to a gamification TED Talk from Jane in 2010, and that's what inspired either Tim or Alana their
Yeah.
entrance into gamification.
Yeah, sounds good. So I want to invite Alan, if he had any comments or questions, any observations, or have you seen gamification used in the past?
Um, yeah, maybe less a comment, more a question for the experts here. When it comes to gamification, you touch on the point that employers don't necessarily want their employees spending too much time on training, and especially when it comes to cybersecurity, a lot of organizations don't really prioritize that. Maybe you can tell me differently in your experience. And so when it comes to implementing a gamification type protocol in educating the workforce on cybersecurity risks. Is this something that just entices people on the point of motivators? Is this something that entices the employees to participate more? And would you recommend tying that participation to, hey, you have so many points, we'll reward the top scoring member with X or Y? And if that's the case, then how do you manage the gaming of that system to not necessarily for the motivation of increasing cybersecurity proficiency, but more of how do I get that prize?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, and it goes beyond that too. It's really trying to build a culture where people are comfortable talking about security. We in past sessions we actually talk a lot about how do we get people to come and talk to us as security managers, and whether it's maybe they have seen something that looks like a vulnerability and they just want to help make sure that somebody addresses it. Or maybe they clicked on something and we don't want them to feel embarrassed about coming and just saying, hey, I did this, and to understand that it's important to report this kind of thing quickly so that we can limit damage and we're not going to blame people. So that's the culture that we really want to try and foster. And the challenge with gamification, it's not been done very much before. I mean, as far as I know of a few games or gamification platforms that have been created for things like security awareness or compliance, but they really weren't designed in a way that could allow you to measure the outcomes. It was more about just getting people on and doing completion. And completion is the first step, obviously. We do want to get participation. And for compliance reasons, there's a lot of emphasis on just getting people through. And number one, gamification, as I've described it in the training environment, will just logically, if you think about it, it's going to improve the adoption rate. It'll drive more people to get on the platform. There'll be some buzz around it. They'll get things done. We've got a definition of a happy customer at ClickArmor, where if an organization, say of 1,000 people comes on board, we want to see over 90% of those people complete all of the training that's been assigned to them when it's assigned within 6 weeks. And so that means, for a large organization, that can be very challenging if you've got pockets of the organization, especially where there's been resistance or people who have been feel that they're being targeted by, the phishing attacks or things like that internally. So there's a lot of reasons why people are motivated either to do the training or not do the training. And so many of those things are kind of intrinsic experience rewards. And so the more people who experience it and spread the word, the more adoption you will get. Then there's also the motivation for people to go in and improve. And that's something we also want to drive, and we want to be able to measure that. So when we are trying to entice people to go in and improve, there are intrinsic and extrinsic ways to do that too. The extrinsic way is to try to show them where they are on the leaderboard, for example, and so everybody thinks they're in the top 50% of an organization when you show the leaderboard of who's doing what. And so when you come on board and you see that you're below 50%, well, you should go in and finish more of the content, or you should go in and improve your score because some of them you didn't do that well on, even though you passed. So those are more extrinsic kinds of rewards. The other things that will drive us are just our own innate need to complete things or to do better. And so whether we're comparing ourselves to other people or not, we just want to say, you know what, I did it not that well the first time. I think I can do better. And so just that's an intrinsic kind of motivation as well. So it's a complex relationship. It's the reason why it's sometimes hard to get executive buy-in on this kind of thing. There are a couple of reasons. One is it's not been proven, in a definitive way where you can say, well, this gamified training was done in a way that scientifically shows we're getting lower incident rates. And that implies that you're actually tagging your incident rates or your incidents to be attributed to a human action. When we know there are a lot of variables, right? There's many layers in a kill chain that are involved. When an incident happens, well, did it happen because of the user, or did it happen because 3 layers of technology failed and the user just maybe it was like a what are they the special character sets, Unicode character sets that are used sometimes now in domain names. There's no way an individual person is going to spot that as a bad link, but it will potentially be something that we can link people to if there are other types of incidents. We can say this is fair to attribute to the user. And so when organizations start to see more data, it doesn't necessarily have to be directly correlated to incidents being lower. You can actually measure security culture in objective ways. And there's a lot of data. Our friend Kai Rohr at Praxis Security Labs and Thea, who we had on last time, will speak a lot to how you can really measure security culture, and the fact that if the security culture is better in an objective way, then the incidents will go down. And so there's a sort of indirect way of proving that, but it will take time. And we are out there trying to create as many pieces of data that we can to show that this approach is actually going to be useful and valuable.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, during the last call as well, you mentioned the idea of making it relevant to the individual employee. What's in it for me? And when you frame it as, hey, you clicking this link will result in loss of revenue for the organization, that's one thing. But if you say, hey, these are concepts that will apply your day-to-day life, think about credit fraud or losing your identity on the web, how can you protect yourself from that? And the more you tie these transferable concepts together and then pair it with, I think to your point, engaging platform to work off of, then that just increases adoption in a way that is additive rather than mutually exclusive. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great observation. Thanks very much.
A couple things from the chat, just before we move on. Stephen, so full disclosure, our COO at ClickArmor, just to answer also Alan's question about and others maybe who are wondering about motivating people and giving them rewards. So Stephen said, we don't necessarily encourage security managers to reward people for being first place on the leaderboard. It tends to drive competitive behaviors that don't contribute positively to awareness, right? Because then people lose track of what they're there for and they're just fighting for that prize. However, we do encourage them to perhaps select someone random from, say, the top 20 on the leaderboard, motivate them to do well, but don't motivate them to like eke their way past someone else just for bragging rights. Then that brings the organization up as a whole. It's more fair, and it really kind of builds off that culture. Also, Tim mentioned in terms of learning strategies in the game, I find that cybersecurity is often taught as a concept motivated by fear. Absolutely. If you don't know what to do, do this, you're going to be attacked or victimized. Are there other models out there? Absolutely. I mean, we are one of them. We kind of lead with education and positivity, and even our phishing simulator, rather than having, that fear-based in your inbox trying to trick you, we do it in a safe environment where it's training, you're not going to make a mistake, and people aren't going to like come knock on your office door and say you clicked on that link. And so there are many ways where you can actually put something. Positive learning goes a longer way than negative learning, and we really kind of dissected that in the last session with the psychology of things, and it was great to kind of be made aware myself of some of these things that actually infect the employee at their level and how they think and how they feel. And it's again, we need a human-centric approach, I think.
Yep, great points. Also wanted to highlight Alana's note about the nature of the game involving cooperation, competition, and developing a team approach. That's actually very challenging. I mean, you can imagine, escape rooms being a great team building exercise, and I've encountered others who've created games for that kind of approach too. But it actually becomes difficult to teach people the foundational skills in a team type environment, because you're not really getting assurance of what people really know. It is a good point after people have some foundational training to start creating more of a culture of security by having these kinds of team building exercises, for example. All right, so I'm going to move on. One of the things that we like to do is a little bit of an audience poll. So we've got 20 some attendees right now, and I'm just going to launch a poll that asks people a simple question: have you ever used or been involved in a gamified security awareness program? And the answers can be yes, no, or I don't know. So I'm going to let people chew on that one for a little bit, and we'll look at the answers to these or the responses in a moment. But at this point, I'm going to raise another general question. We like to have some open questions for discussion as well. So how can you show the value of using gamification to management? And what I would like to sort of start out with here is, I think, first of all, as I kind of mentioned, it's hard sometimes to convince management because they, number one, have probably in the past, first of all, not seen a lot of return on investment from any security awareness training, although there is data that says that security awareness training does have an ROI. It has to be kind of looked at carefully and with caveats, I think, in a lot of cases. But I believe that it really does. But what we find is that seeing is believing when it comes to looking at or trying to describe to an executive how gamification works and what the benefits are. It can be very complicated, and they get distracted easily. So they need to make gamification themselves just to actually focus on that question. And that's actually what we do. We'll show people a 2-minute demo, and all of a sudden they'll go, oh, I see, I get how that can work. And that's really the most effective way that we've seen, just providing a demonstration. But you can also find others who support the idea of gamification internally within your organization, and brainstorm with them how you can actually demonstrate or argue to executives that there should be at least some kind of a trial or an attempt at doing gamification to see how it works within the organization. And then you can also reach out to people externally. And that's what we're doing really here in the forum, is trying to help people learn from other people's experience and collaborate. So those are my thoughts on how you can show the value of gamification to management. Anybody in the chat, or Ryan or Alan, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, from my side, when I've been met with this question, oh, but games, we don't have time for games, and all those different pushbacks. So I think the number one is actually explaining what gamification is, defining the word gamification and its concepts. I think will go a long way to kind of help if you are, trying to convince your manager, your CISO, or whoever's signing off on security awareness. And the second, I think, is actually then related to other successful platforms and products out there. So again, gamification in cybersecurity might be new, but gamification as a concept of learning isn't. And so you could look to someone like the Duolingo app, which I'm sure, show of hands, more than half of us have probably installed at some point on our phone, and have we had the discipline to stick it through and learn that language? Probably not, but I know there would be a few successful people from here, but it's all driven through gamified mechanics. And again, you're not necessarily playing games, you're learning the language. So cybersecurity training can be very much similar. So I think use those kind of similarities in life and find your examples, and then actually be able to define gamification and take it beyond the fact that it's not just playing games, it's a type of learning. So that'd be kind of my method and my approach to sway that.
I'll also jump in here.
Yeah.
I recently read the Verizon report, the DBIR report on cybersecurity and data breaches, and I work within manufacturing. And it was really surprising for me to find out that manufacturers are one of the largest targets for cyber attacks. And so, talking about psychology over the last few sessions, and you mentioned the executives and getting executive buy-in, how do you kind of remove that optimism bias of, hey, it'll happen to everyone but me? Hey, there's so many manufacturers out there. Why would they target us? How would they know to target us? And what would your answer kind of be to that type of question to encourage those executives to think differently?
There's a couple of answers to that, but the one that answers your question directly is I think you don't have to be targeted these days. There are so many attackers that are doing a broad attack. They can basically start by doing a broad attack and to see who has some vulnerability. And as soon as they find somebody with vulnerability, then they will do more targeted initiatives. And so you can expect that you're going to get attacked. It's inevitable. The question is, how resilient are you going to be? And it's kind of like, do you have a lock on your doors on your house so that the attacker goes to the next house, gives up and moves on, right? As opposed to saying, well, the door's not locked, I'm going to go in and see what I can find.
Yeah, it's a crime of opportunity rather than necessarily anything else. So going further down that route, how do you, once an organization gets attacked, what is the kind of damage control that ClickArmor might do for a client experiencing that? I hear a lot about how many organizations now, rather than, especially if they're member facing, if they're public facing, they kind of adopt insurance type perspective where they will pay into their cybersecurity monitoring or identity monitoring as opposed to actually solving the problem per se. What's your perspective on that? And
I think that last thing you mentioned is a lawyer's tactic, right? I mean, they have to say this. They have to say there's no evidence that any data has been compromised, and they have to say we're going to pay for monitoring of credit, etc., because that's really all they can do at that point. It is very much a practice and be ready kind of mentality, rather than, okay, now we've been breached, how can a training program help us at this point? It's a little bit late. But what you can do is you can teach people about incident response. What are the expected actions that they should take when there is a breach, for example? And another really powerful thing is tabletop exercises. And that's something we're working on as a different form of gamified exercise. And that is bring people into an environment where they can explore a number of possible different types of breaches. And there are organizations that do this on a monthly basis. And it's low tech. They basically meet around a table or on a Zoom call and say, okay, here's the scenario. Our code base just got hacked, and all our software is on the internet now. So what do we do? And so you work through these scenarios, and you start to find business vulnerabilities, business process vulnerabilities. And those are the things that can be addressed in advance so that there's less likelihood of a breach. But the only thing you can do after a breach has occurred is expect that people will follow the right incident response processes, and that the incident response plan will work as it should. And those are the key things that we need to make sure people understand.
Makes sense. Thanks.
All right. Now I'm going to share my screen again and go to our next poll question. So see what people have to say about this one. It is, do you believe that gamification done correctly can improve employee engagement and knowledge retention? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. So this is one I'm going to let run for a while and see what kind of response we get from people. So yes, I'm going to just do a really quick pitch for ClickArmor since we sponsor this event, this series of events. Really just wanted to say, sometimes you just need to see it to understand the value. It's just like what I said a minute ago. What ClickArmor provides is a more engaging and effective experience for users. It does provide those intrinsic rewards, which tend to pay off for the longer term, keeping that security culture active. And it does it in a way that's easier to deploy. You don't have to do whitelisting of firewalls or get the buy-in from payroll to teach people about payroll scam emails. So all these kinds of things we can demonstrate really quickly for you in just a couple of minutes. So if you're interested in learning more about the ClickArmor platform and how we use gamification to build a stronger security culture, then just please ask for a demo. Ryan and or I would be happy to help. So with that in mind, moving along, how would you like to see gamification employed within security awareness programs? This is an interesting one. I'm assuming that people do want to see it. I think I've talked to enough people, and Ryan's talked to enough people, that we generally see that people who are practitioners on the front lines, like security awareness managers, security operations managers, managed service providers, they all see the value in gamification typically. But how would it actually be employed within security awareness programs in a way that's productive and fits the organization? So what I find is it's good to do what I call the gamified training first before you start doing gamified business processes. Some people feel it's easy to implement a gamified business process. We set up a risk score or a vulnerability score and just everybody aims for it and we find our way there. Well, it's really actually not that likely that the whole organization or a significant part of the organization is actually going to become less vulnerable just because you've put that target out there. The whole organization may score well, but there could be pockets of the organization that are extremely vulnerable still. So we look at the idea of using gamification in the training, foundational training part first, so that you can build the confidence of the team and the knowledge and ability of people to just say, oh, okay, it's a security issue, I know what to do. So those are things we want to see in place before you start trying to actually do risk scores and move people as an organization through gamified metrics and things like that. That's my approach to it. Anybody have another thought on that, Ryan or Alan?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you on this one, Scott. And from as you said, with our experience of talking to people and getting the feedback, the people that are closest to the people is typically where I see that they're big fans of interactiveness, gamification, and kind of having that I guess more of a non-learning environment for learning, and something that's non-traditional in security awareness. And so whenever we have a topic that this doesn't just apply to security awareness, I think a gamified model with psychological drivers in an appropriate manner should be how we're learning everything. But that's going to be up to other elements as well. So I don't really have too much to add into this. We would be happy to kind of hear from anyone in the chat though that is in this position and how they would incorporate it into their security awareness program. What mechanics would you look at, and what things maybe have you tried in the past? Yeah, we'd be happy to hear that.
Okay. I think Alana was kind of almost talking about the same idea that you had, which is how, the whole approach of gamification could be used to apply to things like diversity equity and inclusion, harassment, values and ethics, even going into, broader social issues, climate change or, fake news and things like that. We want to make sure that people generally have an awareness, even pandemics, right? There's certain basic things you want people to learn about it, and not fall for the FUD or the other misinformation. And so gamification can really help people absorb those concepts, I think, a lot faster. It all comes down to, as I said, the attitude that people have generally of I'm too busy, and they're looking for reasons to disengage with training. So the more you can do to drive extrinsically and intrinsically, the motivation needs to be there in the long term for it to really work. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll that we just had running, and we'll move on to the next one. Our last poll question is, what do you think executives' attitudes towards gamification is within your organization? Is it generally seen as essential, useful, or no strong attitude, or not very useful, or irrelevant? I would like to just go into our poll results and see what people have answered. Have you ever used or been involved in gamified security awareness programs? So exactly 50% people said they have been. So that's interesting for us too. Good insights. And we may come back to that in a bit. And the other one was, do you believe that gamification can help improve employee engagement and knowledge retention? Pretty much all but one said yes, and the other one said not sure. In the untitled poll number 3, what do you think executives' attitudes towards gamification is within your organization? So really kind of an interesting mix. So some feel it's essential, some feel it's useful, about the same feel it's no strong attitude, and about the same feel not very useful. So very evenly split, except at least there's nobody who says it's irrelevant. So
that's a good sign. I've also seen it, be interesting to hear sometimes, what the executive demographics are. And because, as we continue to move forward, we're starting to see younger executives, or executives that grew up, in the 70s and 80s where games were now a thing. Right? When we started to grow up with games, then now that gamification is a little bit more familiar. Albeit if you grew up in generations before that where you weren't immersed in it, you weren't, sometimes raised by it. It would be, that's where you don't necessarily know the qualities and the abilities and the things, but for someone like myself, I can talk about it because I grew up on it. And I see Alan, nodding his head as well. And, it's once you're immersed in something, it becomes more real and more tangible. So, sometimes it's that exposure that is just literally the difference between someone wanting to try something they haven't before versus, the same old kind of method of, well, here's your PDF, you better read this.
I'll build on that. I think the case for gamification has only become stronger as a result of the pandemic, because pre-pandemic, you had a lot of people saying, hey, there's no way to make a meaningful connection over video. And certainly there's no way to make a meaningful connection over voice alone. And we've seen now the emergence of social audio take place within the world of social media. And, for you and I, Ryan, we might have experienced making lifelong friendships through our games and never having actually physically met with these people. And so how do we start to change the dialogue and the mindset around what's engaging and what's not, what's real value and what isn't? And I think, these topics around cybersecurity prevention is very relevant to a lot of conversations that are happening in parallel throughout the organization as well. So I think it's a worthy point to explore.
Absolutely. And it's something that just, it spills over into our everyday life. So, it's the more we normalize it, the more we just bring it into the day-to-day talk, and we use these modern techniques in order to translate that message. I think we're moving in the right direction. That great point. Thank you, Alan, for everything today.
Yeah, I really appreciate your input, Alan. And I think just the only thing I'll add is that I find that executives, we all know executives have such little time, right? They're trying to make a lot of important decisions in very little time. And so what they really want is concise, numbers that they can look at on a dashboard and quickly decide if something is good or bad. And the problem with security awareness and human risk management is it's messy. There are no single numbers, except everybody kind of has zeroed in on click rates and reporting rates from live phishing simulations. And I'm not totally against them, but you hear me rant a lot about how they can be misused and abused. We talked about that in our last session. And the fact that executives really kind of rely on those numbers a lot, and they kind of expect that just because, for example, your cyber insurance policy carrier says you must do phishing simulations, that it must be done using live phishing simulations that go into your inbox, versus one that may be less intrusive to the organization, less costly, and maybe has a better impact on the culture. And so we're trying to get that message so it can flow down from those authorities to tell executives, you know what, they don't all have to be done that way, because it's not necessarily giving you the data that will reduce your risk. So those are things that we want to try and continue to focus on. And we think gamification can be a big part of that. We like to just let people think for a minute about what are some of the key insights that we may have uncovered. I like to look at it from 3 points of view. One is for executives. How can we help security awareness managers discuss or inform their executives around the things that they're finding challenging and that we addressed today? So any insights, Ryan, that you can think of for executives around how we can use what we learned today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one would be, what is gamification, and understand that, you know, there's more to it than simply playing games. I think that would be one of the biggest insights if I was going to kind of take away, you know, something from this as just an attendee. And then also, you know, what are those other examples out there, and what are the examples of success? And, you know, so that way you can kind of position it as, this is a new way of thinking. This is something that has been successful in other models, and let's apply this to security awareness. That would be kind of like my multi-pronged approach if I had to go argue for some dollars or for some. Yeah, and Alan, what are some of your takeaways if you're going to go back and fight this one to get approved, you know, budgetary approval or executive buy-in, you know, and or you have 30 seconds in the elevator to try and convince someone to switch to gamification? What's your pitch?
Yeah, I mean, my heart goes out to you both, because I find myself within operations, right? And I feel like there's a lot of synergies when it comes to, if operations is doing their job, then everything runs smoothly. If you're not doing your job, then you get an earful. So same way with, I think what Scott is touching on in terms of ROI. How do you measure an ROI of something that's never meant to manifest? Right? You want cybersecurity attacks to not happen, and when it doesn't happen, you kind of have this question in the back of your head: hey, did we really have to spend X amount on this program when we don't see anything from it? And so I think it's important to reframe this conversation as everyone is vulnerable if you don't have a program in place, and you know, really diving down from an operational sense. In the case where you do get attacked, what's at stake? What's the risk? And are you willing to encapsulate that risk as part of your business strategy? Yes or no? And then I think the program itself hopefully will sell itself.
Excellent. So one of the things that I wanted to announce today, I'm just going to share my screen, is that we are launching a new website for the Cybersecurity Awareness Forum. I've talked about this for about a year now. And as we built up, you know, the number of people on these calls, it's getting harder and harder to just manage the notifications and reminders. And I thought, be much easier to do if we had a platform that we could do this from. There's going to be friction, obviously, trying to get people to come onto the platform and register, but we actually see this as an opportunity to provide a whole lot more value as well. So I think there's something, I'll just show you what this site looks like. We just stood it up. It's very simple right now, but what I want to do is make it more useful from a collaboration point of view. So our whole next session is going to be about collaboration. And so if you can see my screen right now, it really has a bunch of areas where you can, first of all, look at, you know, what's the next event that's coming up. It's going to be how to increase industry collaboration for security awareness. You'll be able to find members in the organization that you can collaborate with. There will be different public discussion areas where we will actually be posting the links to our video recordings of these sessions. So that's another easy way to manage the outcomes of these sessions. We'll be publishing our CISO reports, which contain all the insights that we've gathered. And we'll also have an area for advanced culture topics. A lot of the people that I've spoken to recently about their perceptions and the value they get from these sessions are that they are good, but sometimes we are talking about very simple stuff that, new security awareness managers haven't yet discovered. And so we want to create an area in this website that is for more advanced, more mature security awareness managers or security managers working on culture, so that we don't have to wade through a lot of the basic questions, and we can get to some of the deeper things and provide more value to people who are working more seriously and for a longer period of time in it. So the most important part of this is going to be a suggestion area. So I want people to come in and just basically give us your thoughts. How could we make this website more useful? We just stood it up very quickly to get these sessions. We're going to be starting to stream from the platform. We won't be cutting off the Zoom. So if you don't want to join the platform, you could still get access to these sessions through Zoom. But we do want to start with just the basics of getting these sessions hosted on the platform, and then the recordings and other discussion around them happening on the platform. And I think there's a lot of potential here that we can add to the value for security awareness managers, whether it is arguing or discussing with executives on how they get more budget, more resources, etc., or if it's just tactics or things that they've found useful from others. So these are the things that we want to help people with, and hopefully we'll get some people sharing. And
I just sent, I put the link in the chat there too. So if anyone wants to click through, or the QR code that Scott just put up there.
All that is exciting for us. We hope it's exciting for you guys. We'll see how it goes. Don't learn unless you try, right? So that's what we're going forward. So our next session will be number 32, November 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up using the QR code, which will take you to the Zoom session for now, I think. Or you can, it might actually take you to our main page for CSAF, and you can join from there. So really want to thank everybody for coming. One more quick favor, if you don't mind. If you didn't do this before, we've got a survey going on that's actually on the new community platform now. When you go on there, you'll see the survey. But we do want to kind of characterize the live phishing simulation entity within the industry and try and get a little bit more of a breakdown. Who has what opinions about live phishing simulations and where they're valuable. And so that'll help us. We're going to be reporting on that when we finish or when we get through our next couple of sessions. We'll be publishing the results. We're aiming to get at least 50 responses. We're around 30, 35 right now. So I'd love to see a few more people just enter their thoughts on phishing simulations in this session. So that's it for today. We're at the hour, so I just want to let people have the rest of the day. And again, thanks very much, Alan, for joining us. Thanks everybody on the chat, and it was really fun to chat with you guys, and hope you had some good thoughts. But feel free to reach out to Ryan or myself around getting a demonstration or learning more about how gamification can help your security awareness program. So with that, I will say goodbye and thanks very much.
Thanks all.